Yeah, I think it's supposed, yeah. Okay, you're good to go, I think it says.
Good evening, everyone. 1.01 is called to order. 1.02 is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. 1.03, adoption of the agenda. It is recommended that the agenda for November 15, 2023, special meeting of the Board of School Trustees be adopted as presented.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 2 is presentations. 2.01, Fannie Howey, Dr. Stevens.
Thank you, President Parks. Ooh, that's some nice volume we have on there tonight. I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to tonight's board meeting. Tonight, really, we have 3 agenda items that we are going to work through. First up, we're going to welcome up to the microphone Nick Van Wieren from Fanning and Howey. And the reason we're here is because the High Priority Facility Needs Work Group has been looking at a variety of concerns throughout School City of Mishawaka, and one concern that is consistent and consistently comes up is Hums Elementary and the wide variety of concerns that we have with Hums Elementary. So part of Nick's presentation will be a few options related to what we could do with Hums. He's going to present, we're hoping for about 15 minutes. When he's done, we'll move to the next agenda item, which will then be Lisa Huntington from Baker Tilly, which is a municipal bond advisor, and she will talk about essentially how it could be paid for. Once those presentations are concluded, we're then going to open it up to the floor for audience members to ask questions, certainly of Fanning and Howey, certainly of Baker Tilly, certainly of myself. We got our Director of Operations, our Director of Business, to really try to answer questions that the community may have, because at the end of the night, this is an open forum. The board is simply looking to solicit feedback from the community. So we want to hear from you after those presentations are made. So I apologize, Nick, you had to wait for me to get through that piece, but if you don't mind, come on up to the microphone and present to us the information that you have.
Awesome, and as long as we're not down to 11 minutes or something, I think we'll be all right. So there's going to be a lot of information in this presentation. This is the full presentation that everybody has access to, but we're just going to breeze through some things and highlight other things, and then hopefully when we get to questions, if we need to come back, we can certainly do so. So next page, thank you, sir. So the executive summary, that's ultimately what Fanning Howey, after working directly with a few of your groups, made specific recommendations on, and I won't beat around the bush. I'll just get right to it. We compared 2 options, an addition renovation option and a new construction option. Ultimately, this states that we're recommending the new construction option, which we'll dig into a little bit further as we go along here. So the first thing that is important not to skip over, and this was the first little piece as a group that we met on and started doing, and it's the establishment of guiding principles similar to core values that the school district holds. It's those types of items that you can always come back to and weigh any of these decisions. So working on your behalf, or when we're making decisions as a group, a community, what can we weigh it against, and what's the important foundations? And so these will likely be continued and brought into an actual, like the actual design of the project and ultimately construction, and they'll probably be manipulated a little bit. But we started with the feasibility study will produce a cost-conscious and viable, reasonable option or options. The design will reflect consistent district programming and provide a safe, secure learning environment. The design will address capacity increase, flexibility for future growth, and adaptability for changes in educational needs. Next. The next few slides here are the building program that we worked around. So we worked with what was existing, what was needed for future, and we developed a list of the spaces and then associated square footages and needs with those. You can scroll a couple times here, thank you. Ultimately landing on, I think the next slide shows it, there you go, the total building square footage of 80,000 square foot. And so both options are roughly that, what you'll see in the floor plans coming up here. but we definitely kept them, and you can go one more even. But we chose the 80,000 as it was a median point between, I think one of them was coming out to 79,000 and one of them was coming out just above 80,000. So we picked a good middle point just so we had apples to apples comparison. So on the site, this is the new construction option, and what it does is it positions the new building in an L configuration, wrapping kind of around where your existing building is now. The main perk or positive to this option is the ability to completely build a new school while keeping your existing school functioning. So there's very little impact on a day-to-day basis to the students and their educational environment. You know, there'll be minor things like deliveries and some trafficking and, you know, making sure that the students are safe and separated, but it's very possible in this kind of a solution. And then once that new school is built, there's the floor plan, as you can see. We would be able to pick a good transition point. We like to pick either a break where the students are coming back or even the summer break or something like that, so that they're leaving the old environment, taking a little breather, a little break, and when they come back the right way into the new one. So per the floor plan, you can kind of see it's divided into wings. So we have your Head Start program all the way through second grade off to the top left there. And then we have your third through sixth grade on the bottom wing there. And then at the joint between the two wings is all of those shared functions. So your gymnasium, your cafeteria, media center, office, art room, everything right there. It's the hub of the school. The other thing that this layout does is it starts to consolidate some things. So your main entrance is going to be your main entrance throughout the day. Even when you have gymnasium events afterwards, it really activates that lobby and creates that. You do still have some backdoor entrances as well that are a little less public or a little less grand, but it starts to create that effect. Next slide, please. And here's a quick rendering or massing, all black and white. There has not been a lot of input at this point as far as exactly what style architecture we want. All of that can still be discussed. And even the floor plan, it's all still in, it's all flexible, it's all changeable. We can update that as we go along, but we had to pick something to start with and start to price off of. So we wanted to give you a reasonable scale building to the neighborhood around it, so you can see a one-story building here with some sloped roofs, really fitting in and tying into that surrounding neighborhood. So cost estimate wise, and you'll see the next option, which is basically a two-story option, is very close to this in a lot of ways. Ultimately, the total budget currently that we're showing is a $38 million, 300,000 project. And, you know, there's a lot of flexibilities in there, lots of things, inflation rates, timing of the project, things of that nature. And ultimately, we can change a few design things and be more cognizant. There's lots of opportunities there. So, but based on what we established currently, that's where it lands us. Design duration, you're in the 12 to 14 month range, and then a construction duration in the 20 to 22 month range. So the next option, very similar in floor plan and site plan. So here's the floor plan for that. It creates a two-story wing. So there's a little bit of efficiencies here and also a little bit of site advantages to this one. So it stacks. We still keep all the younger kids on one level up on that upper L of the wing. And then the third through fourth is on the lower level, fifth and sixth is up on the second floor. And if you go to the next slide, there we go. So the real advantages here are on the site plan. So this does a number of things for you. It starts to consolidate the school for one a little bit, brings everything towards that middle section, but then it also leaves additional space open on the site. So if you ever had an addition that needed to be put on, any kind of, and that could be even student population addition, that could be learning center, that could be field house type thought process. I mean, you know, sky's the limit. So while nothing's planned, we hope we're providing for plenty of flexibility and growth and things at this time. it does have some advantages for that, and that site can be used in other ways as well. So one thing I didn't touch on, but is a really cool element of the floor plans, is the classroom setup. So this does a number of things for you. It creates a shared flexible space in the middle of the classroom pods, we'll say. So this would be where you would have, say, all the second graders all surrounding one flexible space that could be used as a breakout expansion space. A teacher could allow her students to overflow into that space. Multiple classrooms could interact with each other. Or it could be used and filled in with a number of different functions. You see some one-on-one rooms at the bottom. You see we're also filling in or showing some options of filling in some restrooms within this grouping. There's lots of options of flexibility in this. Ultimately, it goes back to that safe and secure environment objective that we had. What it does is it creates one more point of anybody in that building that's looking to do any harm. You know, the students aren't just going on a double-loaded corridor back to one room and that door is still right there off of the corridor. It's creating one more little divider, one more piece of safety there. So very similarly, I said there was just a little bit of efficiencies for this option. We're showing the $37,870,000. Similar, actually the same design durations and same construction durations. So option 2 is your additions and renovations option. And this one, I'll admit, was a challenge. A lot of times when we're looking at these kind of options, there's a good start point, a strong wing to the building, something that is just strong. This building, I'm sad to say, it lacks a lot of those kind of qualities for one reason or another. The flexibility that was originally designed into those classrooms with openable partition walls and things of that nature, it just didn't quite get there. The classrooms ended up being small. Those partitions need to remain closed. Still don't have doors on the classroom, so you don't have the teachability there and you're interrupting each other. Even on this wing, you know, your gymnasium is below ground level. There's not ADA accessibility here. Lots of different concerns throughout this building. So that was a real challenge of how do we save something and build upon it when it needs a lot of building. So what we came up with was a significantly phased approach. So that's one piece that I would heavily make sure you understand on this option is there's a very strong need for portable classrooms and also for students to be shifting around each, you know, every few months. So there's going to be lots of movement in the population. Next slide. Yep, there you go. And here you can start to see some of that phasing. So part of the efforts is we would need to do, like phase 1 is a demo of kind of the northwest wing, which would make room for additional the gymnasium, cafeteria, things of that, the new ones to be built in that place. And then that would allow us to come in, demo out this section, the gymnasium and cafeteria, and then come in and build the larger portion of academic wing. And then from there, that south academic wing would be able to be renovated along with the media center that's kind of in the middle of the building. So lots of moving parts there, very intricate, would take a lot of coordination, and it would be a disruption to the students. But obviously we would do our best to mitigate that. And there you can see the plan blown up a little bit. You also lose a little bit of connectivity between age groups here. You know, we have the K and Head Start down on the south wing along with first grade there. Second grade comes up into kind of the area just west of the media center, and then third through sixth grade are off in their own wing. It still does create that active joint between the two wings where we have a lot of the shared space and shared functions. And there you can kind of see the darker gray on the left side is what's existing. The little bit whiter boxes, similar style to before, is what's new and being proposed. So ultimately, I think it still has a lot of successes to it. It keeps the cost of some of the site work down a little bit, reactivates some of the building you already have, and starts to tie it back into the neighborhood function as well. Same kind of interior learning environment, so we can skip that one. And then ultimately, here's where we come to the cost estimate. So this one is $34,387,500. Design duration 14 to 16 months, and then construction duration 26 to 30. So you see the price tag is, in all relativity, not much higher than a new construction. And by the end of it, you are still dealing with some old systems within the building. You would replace a lot of it, but you're still dealing with some old infrastructure that is just part of the building. The other piece is a longer design duration, and then also a longer construction duration, and that's because of the phasing of it. And then the appendixes, I won't bore you with those, but that's a lot of what our group talked about as we went along and developed those final slides and final options and material for you. So I think I did okay on time, I'm hoping. All right. And at the end, I'll welcome any questions from anybody. Thank you.
Thank you. 2.02 is Baker Tilly. Dr. Stevens.
All right, thank you again, Mrs. Parks. Next up, as we talked earlier about, I'm going to invite Lisa Huntington to the microphone to talk a little bit about how a project like this could be financed if we so choose to move forward.
Thank you. So if you'd like to just go to the next page. So I'll start first of all with where we are today. This graph is a picture of the school corporation's outstanding debt service as it stands. What I'd like to point out here is that you can see on the chart there are several step downs in the graph. That allows the school corporation the ability and flexibility to issue additional debt without impacting the debt service fund tax rate. So we can do this and mitigate any impact to taxpayers with this kind of structure. Here, in very small print, it looks like, are the numbers behind that graph. So we can just move to the next slide. This schedule is the general obligation bonding capacity of the school corporation. It is based upon the certified net assessed value of the school district. We just issued some general obligation bonds, so we have to deduct that from the capacity, and you can see we have general obligation bonding capacity of about $3,000 after the issuance of the bonds we did this fall. This is just good to know. These are bonds that the school corporation can issue in its own name, but we have other financing options available, which I'll talk about on the next slide. So this is a lease financing or first mortgage bonds. We assumed a borrowing amount of around $40 million to be repaid in about 19 years. The total interest paid is going to be about $26 million with an estimated annual payment of about $3 million. The important thing here that you'd like to see is that the tax rate impact, that very last line, is zero to the community of Mishawaka schools. A couple of assumptions we made is that we did assume a conservative interest rate of 5.5%, and we did base our estimates on the 2024 net assessed value with no growth. So again, very, very conservative. So if we'd like to go to the next slide, this graph now illustrates what it would look like for the future borrowing of the school corporation. So again, we have the colored bars that illustrate the existing debt service, the new debt service of the $40 million, and then also some additional capacity to issue debt of about $17 million to provide, again, the school corporation flexibility to address other projects as they come up. And the graph now is a straight line all the way across. And if you take a look at that black line that goes across, That is the estimated debt service tax rate. Again, it stays level. So we don't anticipate any impact to the debt service fund tax rate. And again, numbers behind the chart. So. And that concludes the financing portion.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to move on to 3, which is community feedback. 3.01 is questions and comments from the audience.
Yes, and I may jump in here, Mrs. Parks, real quick. So anyone who'd like to ask questions or make comments is certainly welcome. We're going to invite you to come to either of these 2 microphones. The one piece we would ask, if you wouldn't mind giving us your name and address before speaking, so we can make sure we have accurate notes of that, and we'll go from there. Like I said, it may, depending on who your question is aimed at, we've got a director of operations, director of business, all sorts of folks here that hopefully can try to get those answers squared away as we move forward. So again, happy to entertain questions or comments. Please.
Don't be nervous. It's fine.
Should I prod David? David
Where's
wants to break
David's?
the ice.
Come on up.
Come on up, sir. Go ahead.
We were just waiting patiently.
My name is Matthew Rippey. I live at 1130 Wakefield Court, just basically right across the street. And I have 2 questions. One is kind of has to deal with what's gonna, if we do decide to build a new school, what's going to happen to all of this? Are we just gonna throw it in the trash? Are things going to, we're gonna try to reuse the infrastructure that we already have however we can? And then the other question is concerning the finances. It was stated that right now that there's zero, it's not gonna cost the taxpayers anything. And that's right now. And I heard like 2024 mentioned, but like beyond that, is there going to be something that comes back and it's the taxpayers are going to have to pay for this? I think probably everybody here is a little bit concerned with that. If this will, right now, okay, great, that sounds awesome, but then is this going to be something like 5 years down the line that changes? And yeah, I could not really see I probably need glasses, but like the PowerPoint slides and the details on that stuff. And so I'm sure this will be addressed, but those are 2 things that I was thinking about.
Thank you.
Very good. And I'll try to take a stab at that, and you can stand or you can sit, either one. So depending on which option, if the school board were to vote or to take action to move forward, if we kept this existing building, then various parts of this building would be used. If you went with the option 1 or option 2, which I think were both new buildings, the idea was they would build a new building. Once that one's done, move the students over to the new building, and then this existing building would be torn down at that point in time. So hopefully that answers your first question. And then your second question, and again, I may, if Lisa Huntington doesn't mind jumping in here, but the financial impact that she presented does not increase the tax rate to the taxpayer through the term. I think it was 19 years and some 19 years for this project. Now, should School City want to take on additional projects, that's a whole nother story, correct? So for this project, as she presented, if we move forward, that all fits. So does that answer your questions here in the short term? Okay, very good, thank you, sir. And as a side note, all of these materials that they presented, I believe are available online as well. I don't know where Jen Smith was. I think we have that all online and on board docs as well. And we have some hard copies here that for those of us who can't see, if you want one, I'm happy to provide you mine. Shy group.
We knew it. We knew it. You just didn't want to be first.
Yeah. Good evening, Madam President, Dr. Stevens, board members. A little unusual, I don't have a prepared agenda, or a script, rather. The gentleman from Fannie Howey, I have a question for him. Could he describe what kind of due diligence they did in designing this? And what were the assumptions? Maybe they're in the appendix that is available online. Where I'm going with this line of questioning is, what has changed since this building opened in 1970, except the date on the calendar? Soil conditions are the same, basically. Is this whole structure going to be elevated? Is it going to be graded so we don't have water percolation issues? Apparently, you've solved the rainwater issues on the roof by enlarging this stormwater retention pond out here to the west, giving it additional capacity. Why couldn't you, take the prints that Brown and Brown did and just work backwards from the stormwater sewer drain that goes down 12th Street here and see, so, well, the pipes are broken underground. Well, okay, do we need a whole new building to replace a couple of broken pipes? That's my question. Sure. And if you could explain that. And it would be, I also have a question for Baker Tilly. On a 19-year bond, we all know that rates aren't legal tender, dollars are. We have no control over the St. Joseph County assessor. And if he or she decides to increase my assessed value, the check I write every 6 months will go up, obviously. With regards to the bonds, 19 years, do you anticipate having some sort of call feature at about 10 years into this, or is it too premature for that?
Typically on a 20-year term, we do build in a call feature.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so the debt can be retired early if the board at that time decides to. It's going to be real hard for me. I live in the Beaver District, by the way, folks. 305 George Street. I'm sorry. They know where I live because I got a standard boilerplate. It's going to be real hard. I mean, if you go into the Indiana DOE website, and assuming the data there is correct and submitted in good faith, you look at graduation rates, you look at truancy rates, you look at test scores from 2011, standardized test scores from 2011, which was the first year of implementation of Indiana Choice Vouchers program, to the end of the 2023 school year. And we'll throw out the data for 2020, because that way you can't use the COVID excuse. It's to me as a taxpayer, I don't mind paying for performance, but I'm not seeing it. Okay? That's my opinion. So those are my initial questions. Appreciate your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
So I don't know if Nick wants to come tackle those, but I would say this before he comes up and tries to tackle pieces of this. We tried when we were in the high priority facilities work group when we first came up with this design to keep it somewhat generic, and we're just looking for sort of an overview of what this would be if we wanted to move forward with that component of it. In terms of water issues and things of that nature, after Nick's done, I don't know if Mr. Miskin has any insight that he'd like to share on, the drainage and things, some of the concerns we currently have at homes. Certainly invite him up after Nick's done if you'd entertain that, sir. Go ahead.
You were going to ask a good question, so I like it, and I appreciate that. So I'll try and address as many of them as I can one by one. If I miss any, feel free to let me know. But so as far as what due diligence was done, Dr. Stevens is correct. Overall, when we got into the design of it, we kept it a little more generic. Now, where we did spend a lot of time was making sure the count of all the spaces, the types of spaces, number for growth and flexibility were accounted for, and made sure that the square footage in the building was accounted for. From there, the designs you're seeing is a culmination of Fanning Howey is 100% dedicated to the educational environment, so we only do K through 12 and higher ed design. We don't branch off into commercial. We don't get distracted in any government work, anything like that. So what you're seeing is actually the pod idea is a concept that we've been developing over time, right? And the goal, and I'm going to compare it to what's here currently because I think that's a good distinction. And sorry if everybody can hear me right? Okay. I don't want to leave anybody out, and I kind of feel like I'm in the middle. So we'll look everywhere. You know, it's important when you look at this building, one of the failures within the academic environment is not just that it had the flexibility of the wall partitions. It was the sizes of those original classrooms. So the second those partitions are closed, the classrooms are too small to serve the number of students that are in them. The other problem is there's no way to close them off and make them fully private. At times, flexibility is great, right? Full openness, open environments, great thing. But there's times where those students need heads down working and dedicated time with their class. That compiled with the restroom situation in between the classrooms actually have a really nice central pod, which is kind of what we're talking about. You know, it's their own area, but then it's not utilized well. Right now, it's utilized as basically a glorified book bag storage location. And even the restrooms are single hole restrooms that when those kids need to use the restrooms, they're waiting in crazy lines. That makes no sense. So what was trying to be done here was an innovation in the educational environment and an architect not listening to the students, not listening to the community, and not listening to what needs were actually needed there. So while we still try and push boundaries, we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't because we would never progress, right? But we're trying to do it in a way that doesn't leave you handicapped 40 years down the road. I don't want somebody looking back at our design and saying, wow, what was he thinking, right? Or he didn't take this into account. No, we want to try and create spaces that are meaningful today, but also can morph or flex, you know, that pod that the classroom's wrapped around, that space can become so many different things if it's designed correctly now. So that's the idea of what we're trying to do and work in there. It could even become extensions of the classrooms. So that's kind of piece number one in your questions. The additional work on ensuring that we're doing our full due diligence on a full design is once that 12 to 14 month timeline starts, that's where we go through a schematic design phase, a design development phase, and then ultimately a construction document phase. So those early on phases is when we're just going to hammer that design hard, and we're going to look at what works and what needs there are, and do we have specialty needs that need to get worked in? Are we missing spaces? We're going to take a whole nother look at it and a whole nother design and tailor it to your community, to this spot, to this environment. So as far as why can't we just do something different with this building? We certainly can, and we've shown an option. It's been tough. You know, it goes back to that multiple problems piece. So this building, for whatever reason, with all of its given charm, is also sited very, very low into the ground. And that's kind of confusing. That's part of, even after some of the issues were alleviated with the roof drainage, which has been an ongoing issue, there's still water that comes in over on the academic wing from the exterior door of those classrooms. And so even if you solved one issue, you still have the other one, and there's no way for us to lift the whole building up and regrade it. So to ensure that that kind of thing doesn't happen again, it's proper siting of the building. We've also already started to take into account the surrounding neighborhood, because you don't want a school right in your back door, right there. So we've tried to buffer that. We've tried to create some space. There's actually some great opportunities. The neighborhood was designed with some sidewalks that connect but stop right at the property line. Well, why not? Let's draw them in. Let's create a community invested school that has a nice playground, a safe environment, plays off of Heroes Park. I mean, this location has a lot of advantages to it. So did I touch on every piece, or am I missing any?
You've covered it pretty well.
Okay.
The why were we so stupid back in the 67, 69.
I don't think I said that, though.
Those are my words.
Okay.
Those are my words, I can't, I have a hard time, I mean, civil engineering hasn't changed that much,
Sure,
in the last 60 years.
sure.
So how's this going to be any better, in 2024, 2026 than it was in 67, 69?
Great
70?
question.
What were they thinking back then?
Yep.
That's the part of the due diligence that I'm trying to drive at. Let's not make the same mistake twice,
Agreed. Yep.
because, then we really would look foolish.
Yep.
And I've tried to answer that question, and the only way I know how to do it involves a lot of manual labor.
I would agree.
You have microfilm rolls in the newspaper, and then you only get one side of the story
Yep.
from the Tribune. That may not be the whole story, but it may be better than nothing.
Correct.
So I'm just trying to say, and I'm not trying to pad your consulting billion, but
We're on a fixed fee. Dr. Stevens keeps us in line.
yeah. But you see where I'm coming from?
I do.
We've got to go back. You've got to look at the minutes of the board meetings back then.
Sure.
And that's one of the things one of my pet peeves, as they well know, in background statements and stuff like that. It isn't for us so much here contemporaneously, but people down the road 25, 50 years.
Yep. Yep. And I'll leave with just a couple comments on that because I think it's great points. Back when this building was built, and I'm going to make an assumption, but I think it's a safe one, the neighborhood is a lot newer than the school is, correct? Okay. So part of what has changed in civil engineering is how you deal with rainwater. So back in the 60s, they didn't care. They expelled the water as long as it left their site. That was good enough. Nowadays, and also sometimes that meant it was going into public sewers and bogging those down. I mean, there's a lot of different issues there. So what we have now is you'll start to see there's retention on the site. We deal with as much of that rainwater as we possibly can without it leaving this site. So that's another insurance to the neighborhood surrounding. Part of what happens, I've designed a number of projects to rectify these scenarios. Some of them were city projects that affected local schools. When they raise roads around it, when you raise other grades, such as putting in a neighborhood, well, they want the positive slope out of their yard, right? So all that water goes somewhere, and the lowest point often gets the short end of the stick on that one, right? So my guess, and I'm making some assumptions there, but that's my guess as to what has happened and why there was a significant point in time where all of a sudden there was more water issues here than there used to be. All of that, the way we design nowadays, like we said, we want to continue to learn and be a student of all of these types of items. So I appreciate the questions because it's important. But that's what we're doing different. We're getting the water away from the building, but then we're holding it on site before it can either dissipate or be properly disposed of. So, and then the building will also be obviously up higher compared to some of that. So I think that
Yes,
answers?
sir.
Okay.
Thanks, Dave.
But there's always more research to do, so I appreciate that.
I'd like to chime in also on some of Dave's questions and concerns, is that function versus performance, right? And so function, Hums Elementary currently does not function well in security and in water issues. The school is not laid out well as far as the classrooms go. The functions are less than desirable for school. Performance-wise, though, when we talk about performance across the board of School City of Mishawaka, there are some concerns in our performance. But as far as Hums goes, it is one of our most performance schools. So they are performing, they are growing and building and doing better. And so I don't want the performance piece to signify what's happening under the walls at Hums Elementary, because we are performing at Hums, and students are learning and developing and growing. The function here is our issue. And so the support of the community and the support of our teachers and staff are twofold there, because it is important. No one wants to go to a school corporation that is failing or not teaching kids or, you know, falling behind. That is a concern that we have, you know, in some of our district, that we're fixing and we're going to move forward, but that is not happening here. And so that can't be a part of the situation to redesign, to make a better functioning elementary school. As far as keeping this building, the amount of work that would probably have to be done to fix it first before we could do the safety and the redesign of it, I think it would just be astronomical. I think we would never be under the $40 million mark once they dug around it and tried to figure out what was all wrong with it. So I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. Those are completely relevant and important comments, but we are in a different place here, function versus performance. So that was my two-bit on that.
You're absolutely fine.
Anybody else would like to come up and voice their, we have a lot of teachers who have been here for many, many, many years, and so you, go ahead, come on up.
I'm Ron Barker. I live on Elm Road here south, and I've been on the Community Collaborating Committee and on the High Priority Facilities Committee, and I'd just like to say that as a citizen observer, okay, on these committees, it's been very interesting and startling to go through all of the buildings in the system and take a look at what needs to be done and start assessing, you know, how these buildings can be repaired. It was absolutely clear early on that this was the building that was in most trouble. Educationally, it was in trouble. It's just not a facility any longer that meets the needs. And Dave, whether that's because of lousy, you know, architects in 1967, or you know, you learn from experience. And now we had the choice really of spending $10 or $12 million on a no fix, or $20 million on a partial fix, or 38 to 40 on a genuinely new school that is really going to be good for the neighborhood. And you know, this neighborhood is one that has the opportunity to grow Mishawaka, and you know, and I think that it's really what we need at this point. This building has served well. You hate to tear down something that's just 50 years old, but there are sufficient problems: water, security, educational design. I can think of a bunch of them. I've been through the building, and it really is just worn out as a product to serve this system. And so I think it's, you know, I just want to speak in favor of building a new building, and something that we can be proud of for the next 50 years. So,
Thank you. Teachers who have been here a long time, raise your hand. I can see you all over there. So you are free to come up and speak about the challenges of teaching in an open concept water swimming pool, if you like, and why we have had to go through and have the studies and have the committees talk about it, walk through it, and realize. Ms. Carla, would you like to come first? She's the
veteran.
It's her classroom, always affected.
Yeah. My name is Carla Douse, and I've been here like 16 years in this building. My room floods probably 3 to 4 plus times a year. I have videos of water just rolling into my room, having to move bookshelves, replace bookshelves. I'll sit in my room sometimes, and pieces of the fake wood in my room will just fall off and clunk on the floor because of the moisture in the air. I still love this building. It's a wonderful place to be. So the fact that you are thinking of building a new building would be incredible. It's not just the water, though. The restroom situation is horrible. We have 50 kids trying to use one boy stall, one girl stall. I mean, the line, like you said, continues. It's just the open walls. You'll be in your room and you'll hear things as you're trying to work, and you'll hear like the noises from the building. It's also kind of fun, though, because my partner teacher and I just kind of yell back and forth across the hallway. So there's community there, too. But I would say from a perspective of it's old. It feels old, and we're doing the best that we can. But I think that a new building is very warranted.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that.
Yeah, Davey, you're all right.
As long as you speak loud.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think they want it on the microphone, so Mishawaka Network picks it up. They may be able to hand your microphone if you want to stay there. He's got a road show.
I guess working. Fanny Howey, question. What is the estimated useful life of your new building design? Be conservative, please.
Yeah. You know, I would say we strive for between an 80 and 100-year building. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into that it depends on.
Yeah.
So obviously, that's usually what you're striving for. Now, there's general maintenance, things of that nature. You want to keep new roofs on the building. The more times a building floods, you know, so as long as you're keeping up on those kind of items, that works. Now, keep in mind that doesn't mean that there's no project needs throughout those 80, 100 years. There's going to be a bunch, you know. Mechanical lifespans nowadays are pretty short. You know, it used to be, I think my mom had a furnace that ran for 60 plus years in her house, right? Replaced the next one in, I think, maybe 20-year span on them now. It's kind of unheard of. They don't make things like they used to. So, you know, a lot of that will have to be replaced multiple times throughout the usefulness of a building, as well as reconfiguring for the school's needs. And that's what we're trying to plan for as much as we can now, so that less has to be added on. Because that's also, we do some really nice additions to buildings, but there's also buildings that have additions upon additions, and they lose a lot of their value that way. So,
Another question, just thought of something. Have you done a cost estimate on the recurring preventative maintenance over the lifespan? And if so, what's that number?
we have not ran it to that far of an extent of a full life cycle cost plan for the building, no.
Battling over the microphone. That's good.
I'm Jamie Wiles Smith. I live in the neighborhood right behind Hums at 3226 Brunswick Square Drive. You mentioned the teachers and the space for the teachers. Were they included in any surveys to make recommendations on what they would want in the space? Not just a business person who wouldn't be in this space, but actually the teachers. And then a couple people have mentioned growth, and is the intention that Hums remains a smaller community school, or is the plan down the line that other schools in Mishawaka District be consolidated, which then, of course, would make this school huge? Is there any consideration for adding 7th and 8th grade? So I'm kind of all over, I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. I'll take a stab at those. So the first question on the teacher input piece, I know Mrs. Dowse was on our, I think, the high priority facility need work group, but largely teacher input was not taken into the designs you saw today because this is sort of the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. So my thoughts on that are if the board decides they want to take action and move forward with this project, and as we get these plans more detailed, we certainly would take their input into consideration. In fact, another HUMS teacher, I think, asked me that a couple weeks ago. We certainly would take that in mind as we refine this process moving forward in the future. Your second question about building capacity. So right now, I think HUMS is around 350 students in round numbers. Maybe is that about right, Mr. Yohe? The concepts that you saw up here today were assuming 500 students, which is similar to our bigger elementaries, Beeger, LaSalle, Emmons, and Liberty. And we did that intentionally to assume, one, a larger capacity of the buildings, but two, I think as another patron mentioned, this part of Mishawaka is a part of Mishawaka where people are building homes, where families are moving in. So it gives us additional capacity for that reason and does give us additional capacity if we were to look in the future of consolidating buildings. To that end, there's no plans to consolidate any of the other buildings. Certainly no plans to bring middle school over to this side of town. That was something that was examined probably my first go around as assistant superintendent when we were here, looked at a second middle school option, and I don't think that that's something that we're looking at doing at this point in time. So does that answer your questions there? Okay, very good. Yep. I think we got another person fighting for the microphone.
Ann Weiss, John. I live on Waverly Court across the road and have been blessed to have 3 children come all the way through HUMS. And in 2000, I began a term with School City as a board member. And over the course of my service through multiple superintendents dating back to 2000, at least 3 different superintendents communicated through meetings and community input that the renovation or rebuilding of HUMS was a priority that would soon be addressed. My hope and prayer, given the issues with this building, not that it isn't delightful, but from an educational excellence perspective, it's time to create that environment for the students that are now coming through HUMS. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, 1 second, hon.
My name is Linda Malicki. I live at 807 West Borley. I was on the committee, and as Dr. Barker said, once you took a look at all the schools and all the needs of all the schools, this was the school that, in my mind, as soon as I saw the report and how much it was going to cost to rebuild, how much it was going to cost to do the new 2-story, 1-story, in my mind, it was a no-brainer. I mean, I walk in here, I do sports for the elementary, I bring concessions in for them, and security-wise, this is terrible. Talking with the teachers who showed me videos of the rain pouring in their classrooms, I'm 100% in favor of HUMS getting a brand-new school for the students and the teachers.
Thank you.
So I'm in favor of it.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tim Zerbel. Live at 2209 Blue Smoke. And I just have a couple of questions. Initially, actually, Ron Barker and I were talking about this school. And, he kind of hit me with a point-blank question. And I said, well, that's a no-brainer. You should build the new school. Just, not really looking at the facts. Now, I tend to be a person who sides on the era of conservative spending and lowering taxes and things like that. As I hope imagine everybody probably is. So I only have one question for the lady who spoke about the bond. That was, and I didn't catch your first name. Lisa. Lisa, could you very briefly explain how the city or the state of Indiana can spend $40 million and nobody has to pay any additional money, and dumb it down so I can understand it, because that, you know, I went to public school, but that little joke there, actually.
I can explain it to you very briefly.
That's a great
When I began the presentation, I showed a picture of, I showed a picture of the school corporation's current debt service, and they have debt that is maturing. So what we do is just keep the same amount of debt service. We're just going to fill those gaps, and I can go back to the initial chart.
He has it up on screen for you.
It's right there. So we have, as you can see in 2023, our bar is rather high, but then we have step downs coming in the future. And so those step downs allow the school corporation to add more debt on without having an impact to your tax.
I had a couple more if you had a little bit of time, so I appreciate that. It makes sense. I had trouble reading the slides. So my question would be to the board, and I don't really expect to have answers right now, right this second, but just things as a citizen that I think about. How could we do this and then lower the tax burden? That'd be my first question. Can we go for 20 years and get a lower tax burden? Would that open up money for the teachers that need to buy supplies? I hear about it all the time, a family full of teachers. And, I do hear things like, I've got to buy my own sticky notes, I've got, you name it. You've all heard it. You probably have done it, right? So my question is, could we find a way to lower the tax burden on teachers and citizens, and then be able to use some of that money to make the teachers' jobs easier, again, without raising taxes on the average person? And then for the gentleman, so those are just things that I think about, and I would like to make those thoughts public. Like, that'd be the goal. Because otherwise, we're going to be at 8, 9, 10% sales tax, and nobody wants to be there at Christmas anyway. But I find out if you talk politics at Thanksgiving, you can save a lot of money on Christmas gifts. So, Fanning Howey, sir, I didn't catch your name either.
I'm Nick.
Nick, yep. All right. So, a couple things here. I've heard the word security mentioned many times. So, generally, how does Fanning Howey go about implementing security into their buildings in a way that I gotta bonify myself a little bit. I had a discussion with somebody about bulletproof glass that was protecting these children, and they were worried that the bulletproof glass was not going to do the job. And we were discussing it one way or the other. My background and my perspective, that bulletproof glass, I would stand behind it. Well, I would, because I've seen it work. Many people here have probably never experienced how resilient that stuff is. So to arbitrarily look at something and just change it, did you consult with security experts? what steps does your company go to, and who are they? Like, who are those consultants, so that we can feel good that we're not just getting a guy that, and I don't know how to put it any differently, but just for the sake of brevity, you know, guys play Army as a kid and all of a sudden they're a security expert, and that's just not the truth. You know that, I'm sure. So what measures have you taken specifically to address the security layout and design, as well as the board, what steps need to be implemented with that to train the staff that are in that building to be able to utilize those features easily? And that just sounds goofy, but does that make sense at all? You know, like I've spent my life doing this, so I have questions about it, you know, so, because I want my kids to be safe too. So, thanks.
Awesome. No, thank you for the questions. So it's important, we'll talk about multiple different facets here, okay? So as far as bulletproof glass, that'll be the first one I address first. While bulletproof glass, you know, exists and is used in a lot of applications, schools is generally not one of them. The cost of that, your tax rate would certainly go way up. The cost of that is very, very significant. So what we do instead, what the whole design is based around, is buying time. So every step that we put in there is about buying time. So what we do for glass is we put security film on it, for instance. And that's glazed into the frame, and it becomes an integral piece. And you can watch videos where somebody's trying to break through that glass and the amount of time it takes. Now, a bullet will go through it. An intruder with a bat or some kind of item trying to get through it, it's about buying time. So that's how those items are rated. It's usually by the time it takes for them to fail. So that's kind of step one that we put in place. But then throughout the building, there's different pieces and parts that play a role into that. So the first item is where people enter. You know, back when this building was built, schools were unlocked throughout the whole day, and anybody could walk in, walk out. It was a free access point. So obviously we've changed that. So now everything gets funneled, and that's part of, on the design feature, I showed you where everything was coming through one main entrance. We're focusing that as our highest level of security, because that's the only door where somebody is allowed to come in. All the other doors, part of training, they're no longer propped open, they're no longer left open, right? So everything would come through there. So then you design in a secure entry environment. So there's a number of different ways to do this. I've had different school districts want to do different ways, and there's a lot of accepted ones. Usually you come to one vestibule, and a receptionist can, in a number of ways, whether it's on an AI phone or whether it's through a transaction window, can interact with you and try and understand who you are and what your intent is. And go ahead.
Not to cut you short.
You're fine.
What you're explaining, everything is making sense. Sorry about that. I guess what I'm really asking is, who did you hire to come to these? So I'm going to, like I said, I don't want to boast myself, but spent 18 years in the military, and I retired as an infantry officer.
Good. I appreciate your service. Thank you.
Thank you. Not the point, but my entire career, I spent years of my life, just like you have spent years of your life designing.
Yep.
Spent years of my life learning how to make a target hard. That is my, and I'm standing here today because I succeeded at it.
Right.
So my question is, have you hired consultants? Who are they? What are their experiences?
Sure.
And the reason I ask that is because, like I said, a guy playing Army when he's a kid does not a soldier make. So to put it in context, make it really hard to get in, and it's really hard to get out. That's something I've learned in 20 years. So does the person who's consulting for your security have that same type of knowledge and experience? And if so, can we get someone that does, number one? Number two, I imagine there's going to be other meetings about building this school. If I were to have a feel-good about it as a citizen here, a taxpayer or parent, what I'd like to see is a slide of this is how it was, and this is how it's going to be. This was the problem with security, this is the solution with security. And then have literal experts, and I certainly lend myself time to do that as well, not that I want to, but have somebody look at that and say, okay, that's a good plan. And I think the board needs that. I think they need that with the water issue, besides the security issue. We'd have a cook look at the kitchen and say, you know, I can't cook in here, the dishwasher's too close to the cupboard.
Sure.
So, but this is more important than cooking, I think. So
Understood.
That was all I wanted. Who do you hire for security, and what are their bona fides? And that was really all. And I didn't mean to take up so much time, but I really wanted.
No, you're okay. We want to make sure the question gets answered because it's a great question. So I'm actually going to introduce another one of my associates. So Mark Joseph from Fanning Howey.
Yes, thank you. Just designing schools and learning environments, we've decided that it's important enough to have those people on our staff. So we actually have put a handful of people through the certified protection through environmental design program. So they've gone to school, they've been certified, and we use them on all our school projects.
Do you have any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing and giving us your insight. Anybody else? Okay, Dr. Stevens. Do you have anything else you'd like to add before we close this meeting?
No, I suppose as we get ready to adjourn, I'll turn it back over to you, Mrs. Parks. Certainly like to thank everybody who came out tonight, everybody who came and asked questions. I would certainly relay to everyone in the audience, if you have additional questions, you certainly can find my contact information on the website. I'll be here after the meeting. Several of our other administrators will also be here around, and the board. You can also communicate directly with the board via email as you so desire. Please do so. This whole meeting the point of this meeting was to solicit feedback from the community. I believe we were successful in that tonight. And again, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. So, Mrs. Parks, I'll turn it back over to you for final comments and adjournment.
Okay. School board members, anything you would like to add or say before we adjourn this meeting? Okay, if any, and I will echo that, if anybody has any further questions or comments or feelings, feel free to reach out to any of us. With that being said, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for coming tonight.